Welcome to this presentation on Advanced Negotiation, Level 5, Module 15. This presentation has been developed to give student exam support with tips to pass your Level 5 exam. The presentation is sponsored by the Negotiating Compass, the complete guide to negotiation, available from the Negotiating Compass website and selected bookshops. The exam is based around a guide which consists of 3 chapters. Each chapter considers a specific area of advanced negotiation conducted with external organisations. We will look at each of these chapters in turn. The guide starts in Chapter 1 by examining the key stages of negotiation, from pre-negotiation activities to the negotiation itself, followed by post-negotiation activities. This takes an approach which is known as PODC: Plan, Organise, Direct and Control. The pre-negotiation stage is very much to do with planning. The negotiation stage requires the student to organise and direct the negotiation. Finally, the student needs to control the outcome. The guide starts by deciding who should negotiate. This is based on value and risk, so a good tip is to view the negotiation in terms of the Kraljic model, which students should be familiar with from other modules. According to the guide, non-critical negotiations can be undertaken by a single negotiator. Bottleneck and leverage items require a small team, and critical items require a multidisciplinary team. The Negotiating Compass includes information on advanced negotiating team construction based on strategic importance and complexity. This takes into account the importance of the advanced negotiation as opposed to a commercial negotiation, and highlights the need for tactical individuals and teams and strategic teams and groups. More information can be found in the Negotiating Compass book. The guide then moves on to intelligence gathering. This could include internal data, product data, supplier profiles, market tracking, the competitive landscape, environmental impacts, and tactical intelligence. A useful way to remember these roles is to use a mnemonic. In this case, I produce super market conclusions every time. This is supported by a mental image. Here we see Superman with an M instead of an S on his costume, and this helps you to remember the mnemonic from the graphic. Why are mnemonics so important? Because for this exam you are using a particular part of your brain linked to memory. In constructed response exams, you are using your frontal lobe to solve problems. It's not so much about remembering the word, it's about finding a solution. The words you use are not as relevant, but you still have to remember key models and statements. For objective response exams, such as advanced negotiation, you're required to memorise words and facts. You do not have to apply them, just remember them. So the key here is to burn the information into your memory. One of the ways we can do this is through mnemonics. Let's see how this works in practice. Here is a typical objective response question. Immediately we can see that this is related to memory, but which one applies? You may already know the answer. Or we could apply our mnemonic. It would take you seconds to remember the mnemonic, and immediately the answer would spring to mind, giving you more time to concentrate on the other questions. Efficient and effective. The Negotiating Compass also talks about data and the need to turn this into information and finally knowledge. which gives us power and control in the negotiation. Consider these numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. On their own they are just data. If I add the word week to them, they become information. Many production companies rely on week numbers to plan their schedule. If they are starting to build in week 4 and this slips to week 5, you may have a late delivery. Suddenly the information becomes knowledge we can use in a negotiation. The information gives us ammunition, as we can use this to calculate delivery. Knowledge on possible delays gives us power to negotiate on delivery in the negotiation, ultimately giving us control of the outcome. More information on the data hierarchy can be found in the book. The guide then goes on to examine the venue. The focus is on the facilities available and the convenience to the attendees. Once again, the student can reflect on 2 of the 5 rights they have learnt at previous levels, quality and place. Although previously you have been taught that the 5 rights refer to the supply of a product or service, right quality, quantity, price, place and time, in the real procurement environment you should expand on these. Right quality can refer to quality of personnel, communication systems, infrastructure, or, in this case, facilities. Place should be considered as to where the supplier is, where the delivery is to be made, where the buyer is, and, in this case, where the meeting will take place. The negotiating compass delves further into location by considering the advantages and disadvantages of home and away, neutral locations, the need for physical meetings, and the proliferation of virtual negotiations and the different skills involved. More information can be found in the book. Students should by now be familiar with SWOT and steeple analysis. This is discussed in the guide. Keep in mind that we can take action on SWOT issues but cannot control steeple or pestle factors. For example, if our SWOT shows a weakness of low capacity, we can take action to increase it. But if a political decision is made or new legislation brought in, we must learn to deal with it. We cannot change the decision or bypass the legislation. The negotiating compass has developed these models to make them more suitable for negotiation analysis. We begin with temples analysis because it's important to include media as a factor we cannot control. There are only 4 forces. Rivalry is a result of the 4 forces, not a force itself. Each of these analyses are concluded in a SWOR analysis. More information can be found in the book. The guide goes on to describe clear objectives. Students should keep in mind that there is a golden thread linking the objectives of the negotiation strategy to the organisation's company strategy and ultimately its organisational focus. In advanced negotiations, the business needs analysis must take into account the strategic importance and complexity of the negotiations. The negotiating compass describes this in more detail by using an example of a typical company. Its organisational focus at the top of the diagram to the potential objectives that link to it identified at the bottom. More information can be found in the book. The guide then moves on to strategy and tactics. This requires focus on the company strategy and the negotiation strategy. However, this will lead to objectives, and students should keep in mind the learning from the commercial negotiation module. These objectives may lead to a distributive or integrative outcome. In advanced negotiations, the focus is on trying to create integrative outcomes. This will lead to the development of tactics related to influence and items that can be traded. The negotiating compass describes some of the strategies that could be adopted based on the organisational focus for the negotiation. These are described in more detail in the book. The guide describes the use of agendas. It explains that we must consider the introduction, setting the scene, identifying the purpose, and managing the time. Students can remember this by considering the 4 W's. Who are we introducing at the meeting? Why are we negotiating? Is it to buy something or create a solution? What's the subject matter? Quality, quantity, price, place or time? And where will the negotiation take place and for how long? Who, why, what and when? The negotiating compass provides information about framing, a critical factor in directing the negotiation and gaining control. More information on framing can be found in the book. The guide also discusses rehearsals. These are essential in advanced negotiations as they can be used to assess what-if scenarios. Based on the goals of the negotiation, we can observe the team and how they react to the different scenarios. They can then be developed to respond to these more effectively before the negotiation begins. The negotiating compass describes prime proposals, a way of constructing effective propositions that take into account positions, interests and motivations. More information can be found in the book. Once again, the guide looks at styles based around the Kraljic matrix. The student should keep the model in mind, especially as they should be familiar with it, and use this to remember where the cautious, collaborative, methodical and quick thinking styles can be used. The other model quoted in the guide is the supplier preferencing model, with an explanation of what the supplier is trying to achieve. But how would this be seen in their offers and behaviours? Imagine 4 suppliers vying for business. One offers a price of 1 million, the others 2 million, 3 million and 4. But which supplier offers which? The supplier who sees you as a nuisance will offer a price of 4 million. They don't want the business and you do not represent the market they want to be in, and the contract has little value. They will not make concessions. The supplier who offers 3 million sees an opportunity to exploit you based on the value of the contract, but they are not interested in helping you to build a relationship, and they will make limited concessions. The supplier who sees an opportunity to enter an attractive market will reduce their price to enter it and work closely with the buyer to make it core business, hence a price of 1 million. A supplier will provide a price of 2 million if they see their business as core. This is because they want to make a reasonable profit over a longer period and will make every effort to work collaboratively with the buyer. Have you come across a supplier who won't budge on price or other concessions? They probably see you as a nuisance. The negotiating compass has gone further with preferencing model, providing a scale to assess how the supplier is viewed in terms of potentially meeting objectives. This is described in more detail in the book. The guide then goes on to explain influencing behaviours, suggesting that warm and tough is linked to successful negotiations. This falls short of what the model is actually suggesting. The negotiator should be warm with the people and tough on the issues. The negotiating compass explains this in more detail. The professional negotiator will come across all sorts of behaviours, including cold and tough. They must be able to handle all of these different scenarios which constitute the points on a compass. How are you going to direct the negotiation if the other party is cold and tough? What if they act soft and warm? The negotiating compass tells you how. Questions are crucial in the negotiation to extract information and create movement. The guide suggests several open questions which would solicit more data. However, the student should remember from the commercial negotiating module that there are more types of questions than just open ones. The The negotiating compass provides a list of different question techniques starting with open, closed and probing, along with an explanation of how they can be used. More information can be found in the book. The guide also touches on listening skills by referring to 4 ears. This phrase, used by McClendon, can find its origins in the 4 sides model that was developed by Friedman Schultz von Thun. According to the guide, negotiators should listen for what is said, what isn't, what is attempted to be said, and the words used. The negotiating compass goes deeper than this, arguing that the professional negotiator needs to understand how listening works before looking at what is or isn't said. Changes in pitch and other factors will affect what is being said. Just listening to words is too passive. More information on listening can be found in the book. Variables are discussed in the guide and a potential list of variables is given. Note that the 5 rights are either directly or indirectly implied into the list. An easy way to remember some of the possible options. The student is advised to establish the value of each variable. The student should also consider interconnecting the variables to create a more comprehensive proposal in complex negotiations. The guide also acknowledges that the negotiator will need to deal with different personalities. One way to remember these is to identify them as the 6 Ps. Get paid, pursue more business by being cooperative, build relationships with people, pick up on what they are proposing, solve problems, or develop prospective clients from referrals. We could even develop this into a mind map. A mind map is a diagram used to visually organize information into a hierarchy, showing relationships among pieces of the whole. You can build a linear mind map as the one shown, or build one with the word in the center and spread out. Once again, we are trying to burn information into your memory, not solve problems. In this case, the word personalities makes us think of what drives the personality, and this leads us to the 6 Ps. How do mind maps work in practice? Once again, we have a typical objective response question. We need to remember the situation in terms of dealing with the personality. You may already know the answer. But if not, let's apply our mind map and go backwards. In your memory, you have seen the issue of personalities highlighted in your map. This leads us back to the fact that personality drives the actions of the supplier. The answer is B. The guide moves on to talk about deadlocks and suggests a number of techniques to try to break them. These include reviewing and summarising, taking a break, thinking laterally, and bringing in a third party. These techniques can be memorised using the 4 S's. Summarise to review the position, stretch by giving yourself a break as you would from a long time sitting in one position, think sideways as in lateral thinking, and get support in the form of a third party. The negotiating compass recommends out-of-the-box thinking in advanced negotiation. This requires creativity, ingenuity, and spontaneity, combined with exploration, extraction, and adaptation. More out-of-the-box thinking in advanced negotiation can be found in the book. In the guide, the effects of lengthy negotiations are discussed in terms of tiredness and lack of concentration. It should also be noted that drawn-out negotiations can lead to frustration and a lack of motivation that will also have to be dealt with. In concluding the negotiation, the guide recommends the next steps that should be discussed. These include a summary, timescales, documentation, and communication. Once again, the student should keep in mind the wings of the birds on the rugby posts. Who, what, where, when, and why, and how. The guide recommends evaluating objectives, needs, processes, standards, behaviours, and the deal. Once again, we can use an acronym to remember these areas. The negotiating compass recommends a more comprehensive list of areas to evaluate. The guide covers motivation as part of the review process and the need to maintain that motivation during the agreement. The student should recognise the peaks and troughs by comparing their motivation for their exams to that of a supplier managing a contract. At first, the student is full of enthusiasm. This wanes as they study the guide and try to juggle the qualification with their work life. Exams approach, and suddenly they find motivation to study harder to finish their qualification. The negotiating compass suggests that motivation should not be considered on its own. It describes the success equation that explains that to get the best out of a supplier or an individual, they must possess ability as well as motivation and be working in the right environment. More on the success equation can be found in the book. We will now move on to relationships and ethics, which covers 2 learning outcomes related to influencing methods and behaviours. The guide begins by discussing honesty and trust. The student should be familiar with the competency care matrix, which covers the person's ability to show empathy with the other party and their ability to complete the process. If you simply show that you care but can't complete the process effectively, the other party will simply see you as someone they have affection for. If you are competent but don't care, they will respect your skills at doing the job. You need both to gain trust. The negotiating compass goes further to explain that the levels of trust need to increase as you move towards more complex negotiations, especially at the higher levels of advanced strategic negotiations. The guide briefly goes on to the digital age, discussing issues related to video conferencing. This medium is quick and cost effective, but there are several issues that can make the option disadvantageous, including the ability to touch. The negotiating compass dedicates a whole chapter to virtual negotiation, including a section on video conferencing. Although you can see people on the screen, you miss the peripheral vision that gives you so much more information. Secondly, the medium is in 2D, whereas normal human vision is in 3D. More information can be found in the book. The guide then examines the idea of win-win and win-perceived win. Win-perceived win has been around for many years and refers to a tactic often used in intense negotiations to emphasise gains. Let's take a simple example. One party attempts to achieve a concessional gain, such as a price discount of 10%. The other party starts out by saying there can be no discount. They slowly move from 0 to 1%, then 2, and so on. Finally, they agree to 10%, having gained their own concessions along the way. The other party is elated. They fought hard and got their 10%. What they didn't know is that the other party was willing to go to 20%. They just made it tough for the other party to get to its 10. They perceived they had achieved a win, but in fact the other party was willing to give them this at the start of the negotiation. This also involves a tactic known as the ace of spades, which can be found in the negotiating compass. The student should note that the guide refers to win-perceived win as an attempt to gain some of their needs and wants and share this with the other party in a ratio such as 80-20. This is how they should answer any questions related to the subject. Some students believe that there is an element of problem solving in the exam because they often include narrative questions. These are questions with a storyline to keep the reader interested. However, this belief has no foundation. The question is still constructed to test your memory. The narrative is superfluous. If the student focuses directly on the action conducted and then considers the options, they can answer the question based on memory. In this example, the question is merely asking what option is represented by gains for both parties. The amount of movement and discount figures are irrelevant. The negotiating compass has conducted research that shows that there are more than distributive and integrative outcomes, leading to a range of results from win-lose to win-plus. These are described in more detail in the book. The guide goes on to mention game theory. This is often explained through the subject of the prisoner's dilemma. Students should be aware that this is just a theory based on the notion that given only two options, stay silent or betray the other party, the participant will take the option of least resistance, and that appears to be fair. The hypothesis works on the basis that each player will use rational thought to make their decisions, but in reality, and in advanced strategic negotiations, this is not the case. What if one prisoner has a grudge against the other? The negotiating compass introduces us to game practice. Although in simple negotiations the answer would be to settle on a 50-50 split, in multiplex and complex negotiations, where the variables are interconnected, there are a plethora of reasons why this would not happen. This is represented by a grey diamond in the middle of the matrix, which represents the reasons why this rational answer would not be employed. More information on game practice can be found in the book. The guide then moves on to culture, which was discussed in commercial negotiations. The way to remember the different dimensions was to use the acronym PELUMI. For bribery and corruption, the students should familiarise themselves with the fraud triangle. In the 1970s, criminologist Donald Cressy published a model called the fraud triangle. The fraud triangle outlines the three conditions that lead to higher instances of occupational fraud: motivation, opportunity, and rationalisation. We now move on to Chapter 3, which also has two learning outcomes based on methods and behaviours related to influencing. We shall once again cover the salient points. The guide uses the acronym BRAIN to identify influencing styles. Curiously, the acronym ends with the letter N for negotiation, which isn't the type of influencing style. However, the explanation suggests that this is to do with compromise. Unfortunately, this would end up with the acronym BREAK. A tried and tested acronym for the influencing styles is BELT-C. This has been around for many years and in the past has served well as a reminder of the different styles: bargain, emotion, logic, threat, and compromise, with threat being the last option you should go to. Time moves on and the negotiating compass has recognised 7 different influencing styles that uses the acronym ELECTED. More on these styles can be found in the book. The guide goes on to discuss sources of power. From the sources identified by French and Raven, we can make a slight change to the headings to create another acronym, RECKLESS. This can be remembered that we should be careful that we are not reckless with our power. The guide then describes strategic alliances. The different types of alliance can be remembered using a mnemonic. In this case, we are told that, interestingly, alliances can be built through cordial relationships. In response to this fact, we may say, "How very interesting, just enough nicety." In approaching conflict, the guide refers to the Thomas Kilmann model. To recall the structure of the model, just keep in mind there is a diagonal list of comms: competing, compromising, and accommodating. This just leaves your other 2 options as avoid or collaborate, which define 2 extremes. The negotiating compass emphasises the fact that negotiators should not be drawn into a defend-attack spiral and recognise when one is starting to develop. More information on the defend-attack spiral can be found in the book. The guide quotes the Kubler-Ross model when experiencing change and the 5 potential stages which may develop. One way of remembering this is to recognise that people become reticent, withdrawn, when they become depressed. This gives us SABRE to remember 4 of the stages. Once again, the guide returns to motivation. This time it refers to Maslow's work on the subject. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a theory by Abraham Maslow, which puts forward that people are motivated by 5 basic categories of need: physiological, safety, belonging, esteem, and self-actualization. Students should keep in mind that not all people will rise through the hierarchy and may be born, educated, or thrust through the media into the higher echelons. This means that they have not experienced or do not know the situation of those below them, yet they may be responsible for making strategic negotiating decisions with little knowledge or care of its impacts on others. This is known as Maslow's gate. Imagine people living on a gated community. They do not go outside of it or know what is happening outside of it. They only have relationships with others inside the gated community. Their understanding and appreciation of the impact on the outside world becomes selfish and warped. More on Maslow's gate can be found in the book. The Johari window model is a simple and useful tool for illustrating and improving self-awareness and mutual understanding between individuals. Left on its own, this explanation would be perfect to explain the original focus of the model. For negotiations, it takes on another role. When 2 parties get together to negotiate, they have information that they are aware of and information they do not know. Some of this information is available to both parties. It is open. Some of it is only available to one party. It is hidden or causes a blind spot. Some of the information is not yet known by either party. It is unknown or hasn't happened yet. The point of this model in negotiation is to establish what information is open, hidden, causes a blind spot, or is anticipated through what-if scenarios. The objective in the negotiation is to find out what is hidden through questioning and keep the blind spots under wraps or reveal it, whichever is more advantageous to an agreement. Finally, the guide goes on to explain the Bellby model. The point here is that we need a combination of behaviours to create an effective negotiating team. If the team are all finishers, they will spend most of their time on the details and not get anywhere. If they are all plants, all they will do is come up with good ideas. Keep in mind that individuals may possess a number of these traits, but usually with one dominant behaviour. We hope you will be action-oriented in your approach to this exam. Good luck. The negotiating compass describes how negotiating teams can be built using the team building pyramid, identifying goals first, developing roles, establishing rules for the negotiation, and finally building effective relationships, increasing the team's dynamics. More information can be found in the book. This presentation has been sponsored by the Negotiating Compass, the complete guide to negotiation, available from the Negotiating Compass website and selected bookshops. The Negotiating Compass covers many of the areas discussed here and much more. If you'd like to purchase the Negotiating Compass or look inside, please visit our website. You can also find more videos on our YouTube channel or read our blogs. The book is available for purchase online, or you may wish to attend our negotiating courses, which include a copy of the book. This has been a presentation on Advanced Negotiation, Level 5, Module 15. Thank you for your time.